Welcome to Fun and Games Side Quests. Every episode is a different host sharing a video game they love and why they love it.
Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Side Quests. I'm Case Aiken and today I want to talk about one of my favorite fighting games. And I feel like everyone's got their ones that like really kind of changed the paradigm for them. And for me, that one was SoulCalibur. This was the one of the launch games for the Dreamcast. I was familiar with the series. It was from Namco, and it was sort of the series that was a weapon-based equivalent to Tekken. The previous game, Soul Edge, or Soul Blade, I believe Edge was the arcade and Blade was the PlayStation 1 release, was a perfectly fine game that I enjoyed enough in arcades, and didn't own a PlayStation, so I didn't play it that much at home, but it was fine. And then the Dreamcast came out, and they ported a sequel that I did not know existed as one of the intro games in America. And that was SoulCalibur, which was the second game in the series, and they did the most amazing thing, which is they made a better adaptation of the game. The home version was better than the arcade game, which at this point, that never happened. Like maybe because of certain specific features, maybe some gameplay element that was really cool made it ultimately a better game. But it was just unheard of to have the graphics be superior, to have everything about it, to have more characters, to have all these elements. Like there was no area where the arcade version was better. This was just a purely better game. And that was the crazy part to begin with. And then you start playing it, and then you find out, oh man, this has finally done 3D fighting games in a way that works. Up until this point, games that were fighting games in 3D had to go kind of two approaches. One was like kind of an arena style, like a Power Stone, where you have complete freedom of movement, but as a result, the sort of like strict, like mechanical elements of input and whatnot for button combos just can't really be there the same way. Or you have it be 2D, but with some sort of image of it being 3D, like a Virtua Fighter, where occasionally you can switch axes that you're in, but you're pretty much locked into your like one-on-one positioning. This changed that. This added 8-way run as an option. You were able to very subtly lock it between either moving on a 2D plane or moving on a 3D plane. And it was really impressive that they did it and that it was so seamless. Like, it's difficult to explain the specifics because it's just muscle memory at this point. But it's basically tied into if you're pressing a button in addition to whatever motion you happen to be making. But there are exceptions to that. So, like I said, it's a nuanced kind of thing. Like, your hands just know what to do with that controller. And the Dreamcast controller was very good for this. I will always be partial to it because it was kind of like it was a Super Nintendo controller, but weirdly shaped in a way that I found appealing. And that was kind of perfect for me. It was so good that that's the reason I got the Xbox, because the Xbox had a similar style controller. So just a weird detail. Anyway, I gotta tell you, the other launch games were good, but this one was just great. And my friends and I played it to death. There's a lot of story elements that were really appealing. The fact that it is a pseudo-historical narrative, and at this point, the lore was not so built out that it was complete, absolute batshit insanity. At this point, there was still some restraints. Like, if you didn't know too much about the weirdness, it worked okay if you cared about historical things, and there were enough trappings that were kind of fun details. The engine was really good. Hit detection was very satisfying. There were a few characters that had some cheap moves. Like Mitsurugi, for example, had this very easy to execute uppercut that they have never been able to get to feel satisfyingly balanced since this game. But in this one, it was really broken. It was very possible to game the system pretty well. But it was a breakthrough at the time, and it's still very comfortable to slide into, even compared to more modern games. The graphics were insane. Like I said, it was better than the arcade, and that was unbelievable. The level of detail in some of the environments was just amazing. The textures were great. The big polygonal characters all just looked fantastic. They were really smooth. While there was some cartoonish elements to sort of hide the limitations of the hardware, it was really hard to see. They hold up pretty well. And it's impressive to go back now because it shows what artistic design can do for a thing like that. The music was amazing. The score is something that I continuously use to this day in Dungeons & Dragons games. All the stage music was fantastic, and we were obsessed with that soundtrack. My friends and I used to have times where over the phone, one of us would be playing, we'd be quizzing each other on what stages we were on, because we loved the songs so much. Like, if you started playing any track, I could probably tell you which stage it's supposed to go with. Oh, and this is a thing that often gets overlooked. The opening sequence for Smash Bros. Melee, which is arguably one of the most famous fighting games of all time, is a parody of the opening sequence from SoulCalibur. It's just that the enormous popularity of that particular game has overshadowed what it was actually satirizing. Just a weird bit of trivia. Now, like I said, the game can be gamed if you want, and so there was sort of a code of conduct in play. There's an arc of system mastery in this game. There's a lot of cheap moves that are easy to pull off, so you can be very effective in a battle. And then there's a mid-tier where you're kind of trying to learn how to do things properly, and that oftentimes is where you get beat the worst. And then there's sort of, you come out of it on the far end, having now mastered all the more intricate stuff and the counters for the cheap moves, but are able to implement the cheap moves without, like, getting caught up in your own head. And that's the high tier of play. And so you could kind of game some of the modes. We would do, like, races to see how fast you could do, like, time trials. It was kind of just weird. Like, we just really liked this game and tried to explore what kind of meta games you could do. Kind of like with, like, Final Fantasy 1, like, making solo character runs or like, all white mages runs. But the thing I will remember the most was one night before I was going back to college where my friends and I had been playing SoulCalibur all summer. And I'm over at their apartment and I said, hey, this is the last night I'm going to be able to hang out and play for a while. We're going to treat this like I'm the boss fight. So I'm going to pick Astaroth and you're going to see if you can actually get through me. And 4 hours later, finally someone did, because that was the night where I was just like, you know what? I'm going no holds barred. Any cheap move I'm going to implement, and you're just not going to get past me. And it was the most intense night of just trying to see how far we could go. Because at this point, there were so many nights where we stayed up till dawn playing this game. There were so many nights where we were all hanging out, and this was just the focus of the room. And I will always treasure those memories as a result. It was a great experience, and we were clearly all passionate about it. When I would do theater and we'd have tech rehearsals where we'd be there late into the night, we would have sort of a break room that we could hang out in when we weren't being actively used for the rehearsal components, because, for example, sometimes you are rehearsing a particular section of the cast for a particular set of lighting cues. We would just have that in the back and we would play. And it was just a ton of fun, and it was just like a big thing for us at this period of time. And I realize that I sometimes discuss video games in the context of, like, the emotional state that we're in, but I think that's how we all embrace games, and it's important to take in that outside context. And this game, in part because it was a fighting game, works best with friends. And so it's a game that most of the big things that I jump to when I try to talk about why I like it regards friends. So nowadays you can find pretty faithful adaptations of SoulCalibur on the Play Store. I think you can find it on the on the Apple App Store, but it's been a while since I've been on there. It's around. You can also get it on like Xbox Live, so it's available. Like, it's a fairly classic game that you can get access to, and it's always the Dreamcast version. Like I said, there's bonus characters. I haven't even talked about that. There are 2 additional characters. There's Cervantes, and then there's Inferno as a playable character. It's not like a huge number of characters, but that's the version you can get. You can get the Dreamcast version adapted everywhere else, and it's amazing. I wouldn't really recommend it for the most part on a lot of those platforms. Android, I've tried to use. I have an NVIDIA Shield, which has like a very Dreamcast style controller, and there's like weird lag and stuff. It's really not designed very well for those kind of things. It's just not. So I would probably recommend like a proper video game console version. It's probably fine, but I would still actually probably recommend SoulCalibur 2 if it's available. Because while 1 is the one that I have more memories of, 2 has pretty much everything that 1 had plus some additional things. So probably go check out that one instead. That one I know was available on Xbox Live. But SoulCalibur, when it came out, was an amazing achievement. And it holds up very well today. And if you are interested in fighting games and you haven't played it, I would recommend checking it out just so that you can see where that transition from the PlayStation 1 into ultimately the PlayStation 2 Xbox era occurred, where real 3D fighting games became viable. And the Dreamcast was a nice little bridge system for that. It had a lot of updated versions of PlayStation 1 games, and then it had a lot of the early games that would come out on PlayStation 2. It was medium power for them, and so it's cool to look at. And this was a really nice stepping stone into modernity for fighting games. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. There were fun modes. It's a really good competition game. Not sure if any of these support online play, because that is the sort of de facto right now. But if you can be playing with a person, do that. It's a lot of fun to sort of get a feeling of mastery of a character and sort of learn another person's fighting styles. And this is a really satisfying game for that element of fighting games. Like, it's a stepping stone into modernity, and that means there are more modern games that better do this. I don't know if I'd say the SoulCalibur series as a whole, but there are better fighting games at this point. It was a really important game to me back then, and I think it does stand as a worthwhile thing to look at and experience. So, yeah, again, that's SoulCalibur. It's from Namco. It was a really fun weapon-based fighting game. I'm Case Aiken. You can find me at certainpov.com. I host 3 of the shows on the network, which would be Men of Steel, which is a Superman and Superman-adjacent appreciation podcast. I host Another Pass, which is a movie analysis show where we discuss movies that we find fascinating but flawed and try to speculate on how, at the time of production, they could have been improved. And then lastly, I am the Dungeon Master for Scruffy Nerf Herders, which is our company-wide Star Wars set D&D game. So, again, you can find all of that at certainpov.com. On Twitter, I am at Case Aiken. Come check me out. I chat about Superman a lot, and memes. That's me. Anyway, happy gaming.
Hey.
Oh, hey, Jeff.
What's going on, guys?
Oh, talking about Superman.
Oh, cool. I could talk about Superman.
I could talk some more about Superman.
We know.
I'll bet a few people would want to get in on this.
I'm down.
You know it.
That sounds like fun. I'll do it.
Cool, let's do it. We can call the show Men of Steel.
And you can find it at certainpov.com.
Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Yay.
CPOV.
CertainPOV.com.